Well, Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays, along with several other attorney generals, are suing the Trump administration to stop new tariffs that they say are illegal and hurting customers. And Mays says she co-led a lawsuit challenging President Trump's latest 15% tariffs on most products worldwide. The lawsuit claims the tariffs violate the law and drive up prices for American families and businesses. Federal Reserve researchers found nearly 90% of tariff costs in 2025 fell on American consumers. Mays said today, quote, "Make no mistake, these tariffs are just another unlawful attempt to tax Arizona families and businesses without the consent of their elected representatives, and they will drive up prices for every Arizonan.
Across the United States, a legal revolt against tariffs is now underway. Now, before I forget, please click on the subscribe button and notification bell to watch our next videos. As of March 2026, more than 20 U.S. states have launched lawsuits challenging a new round of global tariffs announced by the Trump administration. The tariffs start at 10% and could rise to 15%. They were introduced under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, a rarely used statute that allows the president to impose temporary import surcharges during a balance of payments crisis. But the states suing, including large import-dependent economies such as California, New York, Illinois, and Washington, argue that the United States is not facing such a crisis. Their argument is simple. Congress controls tariffs. Emergency tools cannot be stretched into permanent trade policy. And a sweeping tariff applied to nearly every imported product could damage industries inside their own states. But the lawsuits from states are only the first front. A second legal wave is already forming. Companies and importers across the United States are now filing claims demanding refunds for tariffs they already paid. These refund claims focus on tariffs imposed under emergency powers in recent years. If the courts rule those tariffs were improperly applied, the U.S. government could face billions of dollars in reimbursement claims. Trade lawyers are calling this the tariff refund war, because importers who once assumed tariffs were permanent are now asking courts to give that money back. And the reason this is happening now can be traced to one major court decision. In early 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as IEPEA, does not authorize the president to impose broad tariffs. That law was originally designed to freeze financial assets or apply sanctions during emergencies, not to function as a universal tariff authority. By narrowing that interpretation, the court removed one of the fastest tools the executive branch had for imposing tariffs. Overnight, a key pillar of modern trade pressure was weakened, and that is why the administration turned to Section 122 instead. But Section 122 has limits. It caps tariffs at 15% and restricts them to 150 days unless Congress approves an extension. That makes it a far more temporary and legally fragile tool. Now step back and look at what this means economically. Tariffs work because they are credible threats. If businesses believe tariffs will appear immediately and stay in place, they change behavior. Factories move, supply chains shift, investments are delayed or redirected. But if tariffs can be challenged in court and potentially refunded years later, the calculus changes. Companies may continue importing and simply fight the tariff legally. Investors may wait before redesigning supply chains. And governments lose the ability to create instant economic pressure. That brings us directly to Canada. Because Canada is not just another trading partner, it is the largest export destination for U.S. goods and the largest supplier of imports to the United States, with total two-way trade exceeding $900 billion annually. Manufacturing supply chains between the two countries are deeply integrated. In the auto sector alone, a single component can cross the border 5 to 7 times before a vehicle reaches final assembly. So when the U.S. tariff system becomes unstable, Canada feels the effects immediately. But in this moment, the legal chaos inside the United States could actually give Canada strategic breathing room, because the next major event in North American trade is approaching. The 2026 review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, known in Canada as CUSMA. Under the treaty, the three countries must review the agreement every 6 years, with the next review scheduled to begin discussions during 2026. These reviews are not simple administrative checkups. They are moments of leverage. Countries use them to renegotiate rules, push for new industrial policies, and test the strength of their partners. In previous trade confrontations, Washington often combined negotiations with immediate tariff threats. A tariff announcement could change bargaining dynamics overnight. But the current wave of lawsuits and court rulings complicates that strategy. If tariffs can be blocked by courts or refunded later, they become slower and less predictable tools of leverage. That shifts attention back to the treaty itself. And several possible negotiation scenarios are already emerging. The first is supply chain tightening. The United States could push for stricter rules of origin requiring more North American content in vehicles, batteries, and advanced manufacturing. These rules already require 75% North American content for automobiles, but Washington could attempt to raise or reinterpret those thresholds. The second scenario involves China exposure. Washington may push Canada and Mexico to further restrict Chinese technology, components, or investment from entering North American supply chains. This issue is becoming more sensitive as Canada explores trade diversification beyond the United States. The third scenario focuses on energy and critical minerals. Canada holds major reserves of lithium, nickel, cobalt, and rare earth elements essential for electric vehicle batteries and renewable energy systems. Negotiations could center on how those resources integrate into a North American industrial strategy. The fourth scenario involves digital trade rules. Data flows, artificial intelligence governance, and cybersecurity regulations are becoming central to trade agreements. These issues could become new battlegrounds during the review. Taken together, these scenarios reflect a broader shift in how economic power is exercised. Trade conflicts are moving beyond tariffs. They are increasingly about rules of integration. Who builds where? Which components count as domestic? Which technologies are allowed inside strategic industries? Those rules shape entire markets, and often they matter more than tariffs themselves. For Canada, this moment carries both opportunity and risk. On one hand, the legal challenges in the United States weaken the immediate tariff threat. That could reduce the risk of sudden economic shocks. On the other hand, Washington may compensate by pushing harder during the treaty review. In other words, pressure does not disappear. It simply moves to a different battlefield. Now consider the economic incentives. If tariffs become unpredictable because of lawsuits and refunds, companies may seek stability inside trusted markets. Canada, with its stable institutions and deep integration with the United States, could benefit from investment diversion. Manufacturers looking for predictable access to the North American market may expand production north of the border. But Canada must also navigate political pressure. If Washington believes Canada is drifting too far from U.S. economic priorities, negotiations could become tense. So the next phase of North American trade politics will likely unfold across three arenas simultaneously: courtrooms, negotiation tables, and supply chain decisions made by private companies. Now here is the final trade economics takeaway. The tariff era is not ending, but it is changing. The 2026 Supreme Court decision, the 20-state lawsuit wave, and the emerging tariff refund cases are pushing trade conflict away from instant executive orders and toward longer legal battles. Instead of sudden tariff shocks, we may see slower disputes fought through courts and treaty negotiations. For Canada, that means fewer surprise tariffs in the short term, but potentially tougher bargaining when the CUSMA review begins in 2026. The battlefield of trade power is shifting, from tariffs to law, to rules governing access to the North American market. And in that system, the most powerful weapon is not always the tariff. Sometimes it is the rule that decides who gets to sell in the market at all.